However, I first read the creation story in the Bible when I was about 8 years old. It happened that, of course, they teach you to read in first grade and second grade and so forth. And then I had been in church one day. My parents took me to church with the rest of my siblings. And I guess I had heard there that a person ought to read the Bible. So I thought to myself, that's an interesting, and now that I know how to read, I will read the Bible. And there was a Bible in the back seat of the car, so I ended up to the first page and I read the creation story, which is the first page of the Bible. And I loved the story. It was all explained in terms that a child could understand. Didn't have to struggle through any big words. It was all easy to understand, and it all made sense. Anyway, later as I went into science, I met people who said that the story was all wrong, and they said, well, how could there be the first 3 days if the sun wasn't created until the fourth day? And Moses must have gotten that mixed up.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so forth.
Isn't light the first thing created?
No, the sun is not mentioned until the fourth day.
Okay.
But it doesn't say it was created then.
Okay.
Okay, now this, the main thing that they object to is that the Bible talks about Adam and Eve being created on the sixth day. And therefore, since we know that humankind did not appear on the earth until very recently, only in a matter of thousands of years, whereas geologists think the earth is about almost 5 billion years old, and the sun about the same age, and the universe is 13.7 billion years old. So they say, how could the Bible, the Bible is completely outmoded, because to talk about thousands of years instead of billions of years, it's completely wrong. Anyway, I thought about this for a long time, of course, because I found in every other aspect the Bible to be very reliable. I had a colleague who was so seriously depressed he was hospitalized twice for it. And later I explained to him how he could have peace by reading the Bible. And it completely reversed the course of his disease. He was able to complete his career and never return to the kind of depression that he was having. And he was.
So in human terms, you've seen the effect of.
Yeah, right. It was actually, the problem itself is thousands of years old, and the Psalms are stories or poems that people made up about dealing with this. It's still effective. If a person doesn't have peace, you just read the Psalms. Read a psalm every night, and it will have great effects on them. So, but there was that question about the science. Anyway, in 1994, in either February or March, it came to me one night after I lay down to sleep, but before I slept, I realized how one can interpret properly the days of Genesis. And as soon as you do that, then everything falls into place, and the latest discoveries of NASA actually confirm the Bible. And they confirm the Bible story.
Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, the problem I mentioned, that the creation, everything in the creation was completed in 6 days, but we know that the Earth is 5 billion years old, and the universe is 13.7 billion years old, and humankind began maybe 6, 8, 10,000 years ago, according to chronologies that are given. So what is the deal? there is a solution to this. First of all, you have to find out who was the first to use the word day. Do you know who was the first to use the word day?
According to the Bible or according to...
According to anything. No, according to the Bible.
Okay, so according to the Bible it would be God, right?
That's God, right? Because
Okay.
when God first created the heavens and the earth, everything was dark, and then he said, let there be light. The light shone, and he called the light day.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, God was the first to use the word day, and in that story, in Genesis, the word day means what God means by it, not what we mean by it.
Okay.
Now, God...
So it could be a million, a billion years, it's not... Okay.
Right. But what was the difference? Well, he called the darkness night. So, therefore, and he said, the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, we use the word day in two senses. We use it for, if you're on a trip of 7 days, that includes the nights because you have to sleep.
24 hours, so that would be, yeah.
You know, the Bible never mentions the phrase 24 hours.
No.
But it does mention the cycling of darkness, you know, the alternation of darkness and light.
Mm-hmm.
We also use it for just the illuminated part of a day. In other words, the daytime is different from the nighttime. You don't need special instruments to tell which is which. You just look outside, and if you notice darkness, then it's night, and if it's lighted up, then it's day.
Yeah.
So that technology was available to any child that had seeing eyes when Moses wrote, and back in ancient times. But on the other hand, artifacts that could measure accurately an hour or 24 hours did not exist in the time of Moses.
That makes sense.
Right. So therefore, and why would God be conscious at all of the passing of time? If he made space and time, he would only keep track of it as it affects us. Say that he would remember that he made us out of dust and that we don't last forever, and so it would be merciful to us, but it doesn't affect his years, his eternity. So therefore, if a day is nothing but a cycle of darkness followed by light, the darkness came first and then the light. So that's why it says the evening and the morning were the first day, or were one day. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Well, it turns out that NASA has been able to show that it took exactly 3 cycles of darkness and light to form the earth and make it suitable to support vegetation. And then the sun serves as a sign starting on the 4th day. Therefore, when the sun was shining on the earth, and the earth was rotating, then all the days were 24-hour days because that's how the sun does it.
Yeah.
But
until then, they wouldn't have been. Okay.
The sun was only formed a mere 5 billion years ago, whereas the universe is 13.7 billion years ago. So there's no chance of the sun shining on the earth during those first 8.7 billion years.
Okay, so you're saying it doesn't contradict the science that they have?
Right.
Okay.
So now let me tell you that NASA has photographed the first light in the universe. Let's think about this. Suppose that you could make a telescope that could see very far into space. The farther you look, the farther back in time you're looking because the
speed of light.
Of the speed of light and the time. So if you knew the number of years since creation, and you made a telescope that could see that far, that number of light years, what would it see?
That's a good question.
It would see the first light. There was nothing else to see. Well, NASA has discovered that there was a burst of light at the beginning of the universe. And they photographed it with 2 satellites. It comes from far beyond the stars and the galaxies. The galaxies that you can see are much closer, but the most distant ones look younger and younger, and then they disappear altogether. Because before the galaxies were formed, you couldn't see them. You can't see something that hasn't been formed.
That makes sense.
Yeah, right. So if you look back to a certain depth, you can see stars and galaxies out to a certain distance. The most distant ones look younger and younger, and then you can't see anymore, and there's this huge dark space, and then beyond that is the first light.
Okay.
So
Going back in time.
going back in time, right? And it's all laid out in space, that is in the way the telescope looks back in space. So therefore, we can't see the darkness that was before the first light, because you can't see darkness beyond light. It's like, looking into a railway tunnel or something like that.
Yeah, you
The
just see
foreground-
nothing.
Yeah, you can't see anything. The foreground light floods the scene, and you can't see anything farther down in. But you can see the first light, and then you can see darkness, which was the second evening. And then when the first stars and galaxies light up and light returns to the universe, that is
So
the
now we're
second
going
morning.
forward in time.
Yeah, now
Okay.
we're going forward in time. Closer to us and forward in time is the dawn of the second morning, when the stars and galaxies formed.
And they can tell how much time that took?
Yeah, by measuring the distance to those particular things. They measure
How long it took for the light to hit the...
Yeah, how long it
lines.
took the light to come back to the earth, right. So they can measure by the color, because the Bible says God put expansion into the heavens, that He is the one who stretches out the heavens, and therefore, when you stretch space, the light gets stretched too, and it becomes redder the more it is stretched. It is, the long wavelengths are red, and the short wavelengths are the blue and indigo and so forth, and violet. And so if their light waves are stretched, say the star is emitting blue-white light, if you stretch it enough, it looks red. And this has been photographed, so the amount of reddening tells you
How old it
how
is.
old it is, right? So therefore, they know they can see the light of the first morning. They can also see the light of the second morning, which is when the stars and galaxies first lighted up. But those were very young stars, and they were only burning very simple elements. They were burning hydrogen and turning it into helium, which are the two lightest weight elements that there are. There wasn't any carbon for carbon-based life forms. There wasn't any oxygen for us to breathe. There wasn't any iron to carry the oxygen in the blood.
Wait, you're saying it didn't exist?
Didn't exist because those elements are manufactured by the first stars, and they take the small elements like the nuclei of hydrogen and helium, and in their interior, under very high pressure and very high temperature, they keep battering each other together, for about 5 billion years.
Hydrogen would break up into
Well,
oxygen.
they would stick to each other, so you get bigger accumulations. If you had 92 protons and enough neutrons, you could have uranium and so forth. So it was just a matter of cooking the lightweight elements until they sort of gelled into the big nuclei.
So you're saying our creator was playing with a recipe to see what would come out with it, or
Well,
he probably knew if he's really.
He created and ordained all the physical processes. So why shouldn't he entrust the creation of the elements necessary to the processes that he had ordained? So
I can understand that.
yeah, so that's what he did, and the elements, the complete set of 92 elements, were not manufactured until some of these stars had lasted for 5 billion years. At the end, they were there in the centers of the stars, but the temperatures were like millions of degrees, way too hot for life. So they had to get out. Now, how did they get out? Well, when a star has burned up all its hydrogen, it starts collapsing and the temperature rises to where it starts burning helium. rises from 6 million degrees to about 40 million degrees. It's just bringing the helium.
That's Fahrenheit, right?
Doesn't matter, actually.
Okay.
And then you get, this very high temperature, but at a certain point, it burns up all the helium. That is, the helium is now converted to still heavier elements because it's stuck together. And so then the star starts collapsing further until the temperature reaches about 100 million degrees. And at that point, all the other elements start burning all at once. And this conflagration blows the star apart in a few days. So
Have we been able to see this as well?
it's been photographed, right? It's called a supernova.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right, well, that's what it is, that a star has burned up all its fuel and it's blown its insides out.
Wow, sounds violent.
Quite violent. Some people say the star has to die to produce life, but the stars aren't alive, so nothing had to die. It just
Blow up.
blew up and went out and so forth.
That's creative.
Threw its insides out into space.
Yeah.
As soon as they were out into space, they cooled off, and the light went out, so that was the onset of the third evening, the third period of darkness.
Okay.
Because, the light of the star is gone. But anyway, this dust drifts in the galaxies, and you can see pictures of galaxies with the dust, streams, streaks in them.
Is it that rounded shape, or?
Yeah, because the galaxies are spinning like pinwheels, so therefore the streaks get, sort of wound up in the pinwheel. And they are covering up the stars behind them. They're too thick for the light to get through. That's why it looks like there's, gaps and so forth. So anyway, once you have all that dust there, it's rich with all the elements needed for life. So then, if a new star is formed, and it shoots through these dust clouds and pulls a trail of dust after it, can roll that dust up into planets, and the planets then...
So that dust conglomerates.
conglomerates and makes into planets. But the dust of the planets has all the elements needed for life. So all you have to do is put them together to make plants, people, and animals, or animals and people.
Yeah.
Now, the Bible says that God formed Adam from the dust of the ground. But you see, the dust was once part of a star. So actually, we are all made from stardust.
So we're star creatures?
Well, we're all made from stardust, right? Yeah, we are star creatures.
Sounds like aliens.
Yeah. Well, actually, we are made up from the bits and pieces left over from quite a few stars. So therefore, anyway, we've only talked about 3 cycles of darkness and light until a planet is formed which has a crust that has all the elements needed for life and therefore is capable of supporting vegetation. And that's exactly what the Bible says in the first 3 days. First the light, and then the darkness, and then the expansion in the heavens, and then gathering together the dry places, letting the dry earth appear. That comes out of the
Wow, I
stars.
never read it that way.
No, you didn't, because you were thinking of it differently. But you can read it that way, and
Yeah.
if you do read it that way, it turns out that the story is the exact sequence that we have discovered, and therefore that the Bible, written thousands of years ago, somehow got the true story correct.